Call the meeting to order. Let's start with a roll call, please.
Lemons,
Here.
Magnuson,
Here.
Pantera, Rush, here, Lenny,
Here.
board members present, Pantera absent.
Oh, shoot.
Okay, no introductions, no communications. So that takes us to the minutes. I had a chance to watch the meeting recording a couple of times, compare them to the minutes. And I'll go ahead and make the motion that we approve the minutes as written based on my recent review.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. Minutes are approved. Now on to the consent agenda, item 4. Are there any requests to consider the items individually, or can we proceed with the consent agenda vote? Okay. Anybody care to make a motion on approving the consent agenda? I'll go ahead and do it. I move that we approve the consent agenda and commence with the vote.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. So the payment of bills and the financial reports are approved. And we move on to reports. And the first report is from Jill Johnson, President of the Friends of the Boise Public Library. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of quick things today. At our last board meeting last month, we had the opportunity to review and approve 3 scholarship applications from current library employees who are pursuing higher education. As always, those applications are just so impressive, and it's just such a neat part of this role that I have to review those and to support library staff. It's just fantastic. So I'm happy to report that all 3 of the applicants were approved and they've got their funds in hand now. So hopefully everybody's happy. And then Jessica, if you could, I don't know if Emily is with us here today or not, but if you could just pass along to Emily and Josh, the Friends, thanks for both of them working with us so that we could purchase summer reading t-shirts for our volunteers. Our volunteers really love being able to represent the summer reading program. It's such a positive program in the community, and one that we've been proud to support in prior years anyway. And it's just great to be able to have that that affiliation with the library that we can wear and show the public and get the word out perhaps a little bit more. I know it's a little bit of extra work for Josh, but he's always so gracious about that. And so I just wanted to pass those thanks along.
Thank you, Jill. Neither Emily or Josh are here, but I will make sure that we pass that thanks along.
Thank you.
Anything else, Jill?
That's everything.
All right, thank you. Next up is Brian Manship, Chair of the Boise Public Library Foundation. Welcome, Brian.
Good morning. Thank you. I don't have a lot to go over that's different or in addition from last month when we met. However, there's a couple things I will mention. We are continuing our efforts and even coordinating some efforts with Emily Johnson and Josh Chappelle also in coordinating some organization and fundraising for the Boise Comic Arts Festival. So that's continuing on. We're reaching out to the community, reaching out to merchants as well, and using some of Emily's expertise and guidance as well to help us with that, which is very, very much appreciated. And so we'll be continuing that. Also, just a quick update. I know that we've discovered a little deficiency in our donor platform that was on the website, and found out that it basically stopped working for a short period of time. And that was a concern, obviously. And so I'm happy to report that we got that up and running. It's functioning, and we have the accounting process of that as well that we can verify those donors and so forth. So unfortunately, there was a short period of time when it wasn't working for us. We needed to flip a few switches, and we took care of that. So I'm happy to report that the Donor Perfect, or the donor platform that we use on the website, is currently up and running as it should. And that's great news for us. That's all I have that's new.
Okay. Any question for Brian? Is the donor platform fixed now?
It is fixed, and it wasn't broken. I will tell you that what happened was that we had a subscription to it that lapsed, that we didn't get notified of, because it ended up going to the city and to a position that was no longer operational, was not there, and so we never got notified of it. It was still working. However, at one point, I think it was at the end of the year, I believe, or end of January, somewhere around there, it literally stopped, even though it was still working, though we didn't have a subscription that had been renewed. So we got that renewed, and it's up and running, and everything is fine. But there was a short period of time that, even though we didn't have a subscription, it was still functioning for us, and they allowed it to happen, but they pulled the plug, I guess, for a time. And it wasn't known to us because of the mailing that it went to the city and never got forwarded to us. So, like I say, a very short-lived problem. It happened for a little bit. I don't know if it adversely affected us in much ways, but nevertheless, it is fixed. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is an update from the library director, Jessica Dorr.
Thank you, Brian. And first I want to start with thanking all of the Board of Trustee members who were able to join us yesterday for our staff appreciation event. It was very fun. We had a single goal of getting staff together to have fun. And I think that we were successful in that. There was lots of time for people to interact with people that maybe they hadn't met before because they were working at a different location or joined at a different time. But there were games, there was trivia, there was bingo. It really was truly just an opportunity for staff to re-energize, connect. And I just want to thank all of you for spending so much time with us and getting to meet with staff and thank them personally. So I know that was a commitment for all of you that were sliding in and out from the jobs that you have and the other responsibilities. But we want you to know how much I appreciate that and how much they appreciate that. And also, thank you for being there. Thank you for taking me on my first ride on a tandem bike. And a really great photo that I've been able to track down. Yeah, that was very exciting for me personally. So thank you. I did get some questions ahead of time that I wanted to go over for my director's report. One of the questions that I had was, what are the key changes we are expecting to see in the new links? So for background, the links agreement is the document that oversees the governance of the links consortium, which is the 12 libraries, mostly in the Treasure Valley, that share an online catalog, and then a selection of them also share courier services. The directors are making this move to really update that agreement because the current agreement is no longer, it no longer fits the work of the consortium, and then also the direction that the consortium needs to go to. Particularly the cost share model in the current agreement is based on technology that no longer exists. So when we moved to hosted, the way that we calculated the cost share became obsolete. So we know we need to redo the cost share and how those costs are allocated. And additionally, it's a really good opportunity to better support the operations of the consortium and to make them more consistent. So at this time, there are 3 different tiers of membership in the consortium, but we're trying to move to one model where everybody in the consortium is part of the career system. The technology supports it, the users want it. So we have an outdated agreement, and we really want to have an agreement that allows us to grow the consortium in the way that directors really see the value to their users. The agreement's going to take time, and those discussions are ongoing with directors. So this is why it was so important for the directors to decide. We want a legal counsel that supports us. Each library entity has its own, legal support, but that really focuses on that institution, whether it's a library district or a public library, in a municipal government. So we really need somebody that's going to be, really focused on the consortium itself, and then give us time to have this discussion. So we'll be able to update you, but right now we really are starting that process. But I think it's, we talk about this is the work we need to do. It's not easy, and we're not exactly sure how long it'll take or when we'll get there, but the intent of really understanding how, what are the true costs for the consortium and how are we equitably sharing is something that everybody can support. I think that was your question.
It was, and you feel like you're gonna like.
I think we will get alignment, yeah.
Good. Change some. They're both there. Could be environment.
I believe so.
Okay,
Then the other question that I got was also from you, Brian, when will the budget be submitted to the city? I want to tell you the dates I know because I don't have some of the dates after are the two important dates that you need to know is May 23rd is when we have our council budget workshop. And so that is the workshop where the mayor's office shares priorities for the city. The budget office shares the financial outlook for the city, and then directors talk about what were the investments from FY23 and the impact of those, and then what are the investments we're looking for in FY20. So when that link is posted, I will make sure to send that out to all of you so you can watch. Usually it's Courtney Washburn for the mayor's office, Eric Villamoria, who you know for budget, and then all the directors. And it's a long meeting, but it really does provide council and the community a real understanding of what were the resources that we were what were the resources that we were able to use in 23, what were the results of those, what we're going that means that then we're on target to come to you in June with a more detailed budget for the library, and you as the board will have a chance to review that and approve that before it's submitted to city council. And those are the dates that I'm not as sure about. And last year we had a really nice schedule for you that we put in your packet, and as soon as we have that, we'll be able to do that again. The other thing I want to talk about so you're not surprised in May, because we're in this kind of interesting spot with our strategic planning where we've got really well-defined strategic priorities, those 4 priorities. And so you'll start to see some of how we talk about our investments in that strategy, even though we're still working on it, it hasn't been approved. But I think it really is a nice transition to how we talk about our investments, because they are supporting access. They are supporting, a deeper impact. They are supporting modernizing our vision. So you'll see me start to use some of that language as we are transitioning to a more formal and structure for that. And then 2 other things I wanted to talk about in the packet. You'll see we will send out a note if you want to RSVP for these. We've got 2 upcoming opportunities for boards of trustee engagement. First, El Dia de los Niños at the end of this month on April 30th. And then our summer reading and learning celebration on May 20th. So there's information about that in the packet, but if you have an opportunity, we would love to have you join. I think Nikki was at the summer reading kickoff last year, if I remember correctly, because yes, she's got readers in her family, and I know they were sometimes.
I was, and I'll say it was really, really well done. And it was, I'll say it felt like a whole community celebration. And it was really fun to go to. So I'll plug that.
And then the last thing that we have, as you know, we will be opening the board recruitments. And so we expect that recruitment opportunity will go out from the mayor's office probably next week. We'll try to give you a heads up when that's about to be posted. But we will be looking for a board of trustee member to join.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
question, but I don't know, are there certain like types of folks that you're looking for? Are there expertise? Are there gaps that you're looking to fill?
That's a great, that's a great discussion, and that's something that we'll actually bring to the board next month, is to talk about what, you know, what gaps that they see and what they would like to have considered in the board review. And the process for that then will be, you know, the mayor's office does the call, those come in. One of the things we need to do is verify that those people live in this Boise city limits, so that they're eligible to serve. And then we do look at the resumes and cover letters with the input from the board about what they would like to see added. So for instance, we had one year where the board said there are no board of trustee members with children under the age of 18 that use the library. So that was a really important strategy. And then also always looking at, you know, do we have a diverse representation on the board, and skill sets as well. So we'll make sure you guys have a chance to talk about that next month as we're reviewing some of those and giving input to the mayor's office. And another thing for board of trustee members, I am always happy to talk to people who have questions about serving on the board. And if you've got someone who thinks they might be interested in applying but wants to learn more about what a board of trustee member does, please feel free to connect them with me, and I'm happy to talk to them. I have an overview of serving on the board of trustees, and then also the Urban Library Council leadership brief that I think you all had in your orientation packet. I think is a really good overview of the strategic goals of the board of trustee members. And so I really am happy to help recruit candidates who might be interested in applying, but since a board of trustee member for a library is so unique, sometimes it really is worth having a conversation about to answer people's questions directly if they're interested in applying but aren't sure. So please feel free to tap your network, or if people are reaching out to ask you, I'm happy to answer questions.
And excuse me, just I had one other question occurred to me this morning. It was concerning the website redesign. And as I understand the steps, there's a web platform migration, which requires a new website structure, which will result in different look and feel. All of this is interim to the website redesign. Is it just on the current website? Is that correct?
That is correct. I think the thing that's interesting is we haven't updated structurally the website in 10 years. So any change is going to look different. There's just no way for it not to look different. When you think about what a website that was built 10 years ago versus a website now, it will look different. To me, the important piece is that actually the most important things you won't see that have been upgraded. You're not going to see the tools that will help us understand how people are using the website, where they're going, where they drop out, where they get stuck. And you won't see some of the tools that are embedded that will help us update it more frequently. So we won't have such a static website. Those are the things that I am most excited about. But also when we talk about stability, those are the those are the pieces that the web team is most focused on. That said, it will look different, and so we are really closely working with IT and community engagement in that change to really think about what we know about how library users are currently using the website, and how can we really use this transition to have a new, have a website that looks different, because it will, but really gives us the ability to manage it much better.
So we have to improve the old one to make it compatible with the new website platform. And I'm just wondering how big of an investment that is. In other words, are we spending a lot of money revamping the old one to be compatible with the platform, when our goal is to redesign the website entirely?
I'm not entirely sure I understand the
So we're buying a new car, need to keep the old car running. Got a big expensive repair on the old car till the new car is available.
No, sorry. That analogy is, I'm having to think about.
Okay.
I think we have a website that is at its end of life. And we do need to migrate. So I guess maybe we have a car and the engine is changing. And the outside of the car, because the engine is a different size, has to change too, maybe, if I'm using it.
Then you're gonna.
But it's gonna have better GPS.
Then you're gonna get rid of it, getting a new car.
Well. No, I don't know if I would say we're getting a new car. I think we're modifying the car, yeah.
Like a turbo engine.
Yeah,
So all development that goes on the platform is usable going forward.
yes,
Not-
the
not
engine,
waste.
right, yeah, no, this is a better engine, and the circuitry, we've got airbags, we've got the GPS, yeah. That's maybe a better, engine.
Okay, good.
Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, and I'll run that by the IT group and make sure that they're not just floored with my terrible.
All right, thank you. All right, that takes us to the director's report, and the next item on the agenda is also from the director. Idaho legislation update.
Okay. So I wanna do a little bit of a review of what happened with the Idaho legislative session regarding libraries for the board. And first, I want to start out with a real thanks to Brian Plenty and Rebecca Lemonson, who both testified with me. Actually, I'm sorry, Brian, you had signed up to testify and then weren't, when they ran out of time and had discussions, were not able to testify, but you were there. And that was really, and you were prepared, and that was really important. So just as a summary, Brian and I went to testify against House Bill 139, which was heard in the House Education Committee. It did not advance out of that committee. And then Rebecca and I testified against House Bill 314 in the House State Affairs Committee. And that is the bill that eventually was passed out of the House State Affairs, then went to the full House and the full Senate, and then we'll talk more about that. But then also Rebecca and I were ready to testify against House Bill 1187 and 1188, which were never full considered by the, no, sorry, those are Senate bills. Senate bills 1187 and 1188, which were never considered by the full Senate. So those were still, they ran out of time in the session. As I'm sure you're aware, House Bill 314 was passed by the House with a vote of 40 to 30, and then the Senate by a vote of 26 to 9. It was vetoed by Governor Little on April 5th. And I want to read to you from his veto letter, because I think it really captures the concerns that the library community had about that bill and its unintended impact on our services. So reading from, this is the third paragraph of Governor Litter's veto letter. My main concern is that the bill's ambiguity will have unintended consequences for Idaho libraries and their patrons. This legislation makes sweeping blanket assumptions on materials that could be determined to be, quote, harmful to minors, unquote, in a local library, and it will force one interpretation of that phrase onto all the patrons of the library. Allowing any parent, regardless of intention, to collect $2,500 in automatic fines creates a library bounty system that will only increase the costs local libraries incur, particularly rural libraries. These costs will be forced onto property taxpayers of Idaho or cause the libraries to close to minors altogether. I thought that was a really powerful statement of why he vetoed the bill, and also, as I said, why we were so opposed to it. And I also want to share with you, I spent some time this morning in our stacks, just here at the main library, about some of the books that were considered harmful to minors by legislatures, because, and I pulled them from our children's section, our teen section, and our adult section, because they're books that I think, you may have seen or heard about, and I really want, you as board members to be able to look at some of these and we should be able to talk about them. These are books that you'll see on New York Times bestseller lists. These are books, particularly, this was one that was talked about quite a bit. It's Perfectly Normal for ages 10 and up. This is a book that, is perfectly normal, changing bodies, growing up, sex, gender, and sexual health. So this is a book that we get requested from, hey, this, my children are, I'm wanting to explain puberty to my child. Is there a resource that you can help us find? This is a book that's recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics. This is not porn. And I was really taken aback by, this bill being called the library porn bill, and librarians being portrayed as protecting porn in libraries or materials. If you got in a library, that would be, you'd be arrested if you were given it outside of the library. There's no porn in our libraries. There are books with sexual content. There are books that deal with gender. But this is really what the community has requested of us. And I think, this is the discussions that, this was why the library was so concerned about this bill, is because we knew how subjective the term harmful to minors was. And we knew that it really would take away choices from parents in our community. The Governor Little's last sentence in his veto letter, which is where I'm going to then transition to Rebecca and her discussion with every library, her training with every library, because this is so important to all of us here. I encourage all Idahoans who have questions about any library materials to become familiar with the local policies of their duly elected library or school board, school trustee board, engage directly with those officials who oversee them. And so, as you know, we talk a lot about our collection development process, a review for reconsideration. You are the people that oversee the library and are really the ones that are tasked with making sure that we are providing materials for all of our.
Great. Where did you get the list of those books?
That was a list that was given to me by a legislature, by Melissa Winthrop, who had been talking to some.
Is the book list much longer and much greater?
It is longer, and there's lists that are national, there's lists that different groups track. And I think there's something important about seeing the books as opposed to a secret list.
Yeah.
That was the thing, that was like, I think there's something about the secrecy here. Well, this book I can't even share with you. I think we should be able to talk about why we've got these books, the stories that are in them, how they're presented. Context is really important. So books that talk, a children's book that talks about sex or sex education, how an author talks about their story in a memoir. Those are really, to me, very important. This is why I want to shed light on this. I want to have some of these examples for you, because this is your role in really helping make sure that we're following our policy. And the more that we can just be clear about the intent or the intended intent or the unintended consequence of some of these things, I think is important for everybody in our community.
Mr. Chair, just one comment there. There's plenty of legislation that I also wish the governor would have vetoed, but I also understand how hard it is to do that politically and for a lot of other different reasons as well. And so for those who reached out to him before, one, thank you. But two, it may be worth reaching out again and thanking him for vetoing it, because it is putting his name out there at risk, and it creates an opportunity for relationships more in the future, because we know that stuff like this probably isn't going to go away. And so if you do have an opportunity to reach out and specifically thank him for vetoing this important bill, why it matters to you that you work with, I do think that would be something that. And then maybe just one more kind of special note. I don't know if anybody kind of saw like how it went down at the end, but we swore in a new council member for Council Member Clake's seat, Colin Nash, and he was supposed to be at a swearing-in ceremony at noon, but he wasn't there because the veto was potentially going to be overridden. And so he was stayed at the State House, cast his vote. I think it only
We
was
needed
held
this
up by
vote.
one vote. And so after he voted, after, their overriding veto didn't go through, he ran down to the city council meeting 30 or 40 minutes late to get sworn in. So it was a pretty dramatic, I think, finish for everyone. But I know how challenging that was for staff and for everybody else who could all this along the way. So thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for writing those letters and being involved and maybe with writing just to say thanks for the detail.
Thank you for that suggestion. It's great. Okay, anything else? All right. Next is a presentation or a report on every library workshop from one of our own, Rebecca Lemons.
Yeah, thank you guys. Well, I want to give you a little bit of an overview of a couple of the key points that I took away from the Every Library training. It couldn't have been better timing. And literally, I went up to Spokane, flew in, flew out on a Monday, spent the day with some amazing library folks from Idaho and Washington, and then came back. And I think a couple days later was testifying at the House committee. And let me just say, please, first, that it was my personal pleasure to testify twice in front of this legislature. It was frightening, but it was my pleasure to sit alongside staff. And that was really my goal more than anything, is to let our folks know and other folks from the Library Association and the other community libraries know how much our board supports them, because there were some other board members there with some testimony that was very different from mine. And so I just felt it was personally important to represent the Boise board and our support of the library work that happens. So that's my little personal pitch. The Every Library training was pretty incredible. This is an organization I wasn't aware of, but they are very familiar with Idaho and are a really great resource that we can reach out to anytime to help with the bills specifically that happen, or other challenges or things that are happening legally around protecting libraries. So the training that we participated in was pretty fantastic. There were a number of folks there. I sat next to the board chair for Mountain Home. There were folks from New Plymouth, I'm forgetting the name, Grandview, and just a number of other library folks. That the director of the Meridian Library was there. So it was really great to be able to connect and network and get some updates on what other folks are experiencing and to do that sharing. So the Every Library Group is a 501c4 political action committee that specifically works with libraries around the country to help them with their messaging and understanding of how to do advocacy and activism. So the first thing they did is walked us through the difference between advocacy and activism. And as somebody who has done a lot of local and state and federal advocacy for a number of years, I still learned quite a bit about the differentiation between these two, with advocacy being a longer game, relationship building, working with policymakers to understand what it is we do and why we do it, and to establish shared values for the way we serve the committees, versus activism, which is what we were doing at the legislature this session, which is where you're called to specifically lean in around a specific policy or a work or initiative. There were some talking points that I took away that I literally used in my testimony. And so that was the biggest thing, is I have lots of stars in my notebook for some of the things that they said, but I really love some of the messaging that they shared with us around how library policies are the most local expression of the Constitution. And that user status has zero to do with the library. You don't have to be a member of the library, a patron of the library to support it. And that's really important, as we see not only issues with books, but also in other communities that we've seen when there has been issue with the library policy, the way that books are reviewed, the way that library board members are appointed, and the overall operations. And so I really appreciated that reference back to the Constitution, but also that we don't feel like we have to only engage people who are active users of the library, but that the community as a whole can still see the value of libraries And I think the strategic plan and our work to help people understand what we do will only strengthen that for us in our area. There was a lot of really in-depth information that I would love for us to be able to do together as a board about different types of people, why they engage, how they listen. This was helpful for me as I was preparing my testimony, thinking about the House State Affairs and Senate State Affairs committees and what might appeal to them or help them hear a message more than others based on their own personal backgrounds and what's going to appeal to them. Is it data? Is it stories? Is it, heart things? There's lots of different ways to appeal to that. So they really break down for you different audiences and how you can kind of rethink different messages in a way that will appeal to the people that you're actually speaking to. They also showed how to use data. They actually gave I quoted a Common Sense Media survey that they had utilized in my testimony that showed that of the number of students who are accessing pornographic or harmful materials in community, 0 of them actually cited libraries as part of that. So it was really helpful to have a study that they've already pulled forward, and they have a wealth and a bank of studies and data points like you can combine. Every library went through literally how to craft a message from the how to the why to the who to the what. They gave kind of intricate ways of crafting your message based on your audience and based on what specifically it is that you want to convey to them. So I won't go into that, but there's some really interesting ways that they can help us if we ever need to engage them in specifically thinking about how to put together an effective message. I want to share with you really briefly 8 reasons why libraries lose. I thought this was really interesting. What are some things for us to be aware of and kind of think of? So one of them would be if the day of a vote for a policy or something is happening is the first time that enough people have seen or heard about the services or the plans or the policies that the library provides. So that just speaks to the need for making community aware of what it is we do, why we do, and how we do it. 2, local or elected officials just don't want something to pass, just an understanding of what the political climate is around some of these issues. If an organization has said any tax is a bad tax or a group is targeting a specific no vote. 4, if there are local watchdogs who are just opposing everything and ways to address that. 5, if the opposition is personal and if they're attacking staff and leadership. Certainly we have seen that happen in our region, and thinking about how we can do that to depersonalize and take the sting out of some of that messaging. 6, the community is changing and maybe some of our communities just don't like new things. And so we have to do a better job of shifting and changing and helping people understand why we're doing things differently. In rare occasions, not in ours, number 7 was library staff or leadership kills it from inside. This has to do with different policies that maybe internally aren't well regarded. And then number 8, nostalgia for the old. And this had to do more with building projects, which actually made me think of some historical things that have happened in Boise, where folks just really are not excited or understanding about a new capital project. They like the old thing, they have deep memories attached to it. So anyway, for each of those different reasons, they have different tactics that you can deploy for how to address and do a little bit better around some of those things. Another thing I think they mentioned that was really interesting is the book challenges that happen are kind of a precursor to these larger policy initiatives that we saw happening in the legislature this year, or issues we've seen with other communities taking up and wanting to maybe part libraries. That really these book bans are a way for people to bring funding, attention, and to build out listservs for different ways of doing things, which I thought was really interesting, that sometimes it's a political move. Lastly, I'll say that there was a lot of good education around specifically the issues that we were talking about with House Bill 314 and others. There are different protections around the First Amendment, and we've got great talking points from every library about how to reference the First Amendment and to have a deeper understanding of what that covers and how we have to address those issues around speech, religion, press, assembly, things like that. But also the 14th Amendment is another one that they mentioned is an important policy to be aware of. It's equal protection under the law, which means when folks are targeting certain populations or communities that may be represented in certain books or areas, that we actually have amendments in place through the Constitution that say we have to address those issues. And then they talk about different ways to use both the First and the 14th Amendment and also the Civil Rights Act. There are some specific components of the Civil Rights Act you can pull upon to continue to address some of the issues that might come forward. But really, all of this is in a rights affirming way, right? That we're not saying we want to take things away from people, but again, as libraries, we have the responsibility to follow through on the rights that people do have under the First Amendment, 14th Amendment, and the Civil Rights Act. So there's a lot more to it. I know that's kind of a lot of gobbledygook, but it was really, really helpful. We got to practice crafting messages, which I thought was really interesting, to get a good feeling and comfort with talking about some of these things in spaces we maybe don't always get to do. But again, thinking about the messaging that's going to reach the audience that we want to intend versus maybe the way we might approach or think of some of these issues. So I appreciate the time and opportunity to go. It was incredibly helpful to, like I said, network with the others. They also talked about, and the reason I'm not going through it here, was how boards should create a body of policies, like a book basically that each board would get with certain trainings and certain components of understanding some of these different policy pieces that I've talked about. Based on what I reviewed that they gave us from every library, I feel like we already did that for the Boise board. And one point of suggestion that I had made was that maybe there's opportunity down the line, if not already happened, that some of the policies that we or other larger library systems have can share with some of our rural colleagues. Because, for example, Mountain Home doesn't have some of these trainings or things or have the same level of support that we might in Boise. So there might be some opportunities, I think, to collaborate and continue to speak with other boards to share these trainings and materials and our policies. But I did feel pretty comfortable with what I have learned as a board member for Boise with the amount of training and backup that we have in the policies that we already have in place. So that was excellent as well. Questions?
Well, it's not a specific question for you, but a general question for anybody participating in the meeting. We've had 2 years of bill proposals. First year, we were completely caught off guard. Second year, I think we were expecting it. We were somewhat prepared to respond. And I'm wondering what we can do or should be doing to have an organized plan for ourselves in a better position next year.
Agreed. I know I mentioned to a couple of the staff yesterday, we were doing a little shop talk at the Fun Appreciation event, but talking, they were going to be meeting, some of the Idaho Library Association folks are going to be meeting with every library. And I was mentioning one, I think our entire board, if whoever wants to, but also other board members across Idaho, I would love to see a virtual training, like what I was able to receive, but maybe condensed so that people feel comfortable, one, understanding the issues, two, understanding legal precedent that's already been established, right? And three, thinking through how can we prepare ourselves for messaging for those of us who are comfortable and willing to testify and stand up to prepare for that. But I think having some other boards outside of just Boise engaged as well, to be able to speak to these things and to have us support them as well. So I did mention that to chat with the Library Association as well as every library about opportunities for us during this next year to talk with other boards and to get some additional training for ourselves so that we feel pretty comfortable and ready to speak next year.
Okay. Well, more on that in coming meetings then. If we need to get ahead.
Thank you. And I'll just say that on our schedule for your policy review next month will be with collection development. Is that, am I right on that? Or okay. We don't have Sarah here, so all of a sudden I realized I might have been way on. But we will have collection development back, and we will really, this will be a great opportunity for us to really make sure you have think of it with that lens that Rebecca shared about how to make sure that you've got the opportunity to really understand your role in explaining all those policies as well.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. And the next item on the agenda is strategic planning update. And
You have skipped.
did I?
Policy review.
Oh, policy review, sorry. And
I only know that because it's me.
so we're revisiting policy 306 from last month's discussion.
Yes. We are visiting 306. This is the unscheduled closures and cancellations. And hoping that third time's a charm here. Think we've got it. As you'll see on page 9, the red line was what we had proposed previously, and I have bolded the additional point insufficient staff capacity to safely operate the facility, which was what came up in the discussion last month, that we didn't actually have the capacity piece also.
Any comments or questions?
This looks good to me as the person who raised the request for the additional addition. This meets what I was looking for. So thank you, Jessica, for taking it back another time.
Great, that is good to hear.
Okay, we need a vote. Anybody care to make a motion to approve this update to policy 306?
I move to approve policy 306.
Anyone second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried, all of them. Now we move on to strategic plan. And main library manager Heidi Lewis. Heidi, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Brian. And actually, sorry, before we get started, I'm also gonna provide some context based on the discussion we had last month, before Heidi moves in, because I really wanted you to know sort of, I wanted to start with a summary of what we heard as staff in that discussion, and sort of what we've been doing with what we've heard, because I think it's I want to have that context so that you know sort of what we were focused on after the discussion in March. So there's two things that I wanted to talk about what we heard about. And the first one was that we want more time for reflection before a discussion in a board meeting. And so that, you know, we feel like that we saw it at the end of phase 1 where we had the 12 key findings and you asked us to bring back the 12 key findings to discuss them again. And we feel like that also happened last month where we had our strategic framework with the priority areas and the goals. And we heard like, oh, we want to talk about this more. We need more time to really be prepared for a discussion. And so you'll see that's why we brought this back for you. We have done a little bit more work on it in terms of trying to make it easier for you to have that discussion, so that you've got those strategic priority areas, the goals, and then what success looks like in them. And so that's what we're really hoping that we have this discussion. And it's an important discussion because this really is the heart of our strategy. To make this a living strategy, we need a framework that sets that direction for the next 5 years for us. But we know it's also going to need sort of that annual refresh tied to budget, tied to our work plans. And that to us is just really wanting to make sure that you're comfortable with this strategy framework, because we really feel the next time we bring it back to you, we're going to have a really solid rough draft for you for your discussion, which is why this discussion that Heidi will have is so good. And then the second thing that we really heard was wanting to have clarity on how the board is involved in this phase 2 right now and then going forward. And I think there was, you know, in phase 1, we had a steering committee, which we don't have in phase 2. And in that steering committee, we had a board of trustee member, and there was some thoughts of, oh, well, maybe that meant a board of trustee member had more information than the other 4 did. And so what we wanted to do is we see these meetings, these board meetings, as where the board is involved and where the board is focused with us on those strategic priority areas. I think last month we had some discussion, and I heard a lot of enthusiasm about work plans and what happens next and what are the activities. And I quite frankly see that as the role of staff. It's the staff that is doing that work, and it's the staff that really are creating those plans. We will report to you on them, we'll share them, they're tied to our budget. But having, want to make sure that we've got real clarity of where the board is on strategy and where staff is on doing. Any thoughts or questions on that before we kick it off to Heidi to lead our discussion really on?
That was going to be my question during Heidi's presentation. And what I take away from it is that we use these meetings as the forum reviewing progress, reviewing drafts of important documents related to the plan, and that we'll get the material in advance so that we can think about them and offer better feedback, and the business will be conducted in that manner going forward. Is that correct?
And the draft I sent last night, it was our intent, and it was totally my mistake. Last week was kind of crazy. We wanted to have gotten this draft to you in the board packet, and so we were going to try to put more materials when we have them in that board packet on Friday, so you'll have a little bit more time on them, or be thoughtful about when we know, hey, we're going to present something, then we'll give you time to think about it and we'll bring it back. So we know both of those are good strategies, and we'll use both of them, but we want to make sure that we, like I said, we heard that you guys want more time to absorb before you have a discussion, and so we're going to really do our best to do that.
Nikki, you asked during last month's meeting, where and how is the Board of Trustees involved in the strategic plan? Does that address your question?
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, it does. And I think Jessica and I spoke a little bit about this in the interim, and that's some of what we discussed. We had talked like a work session, and I think our point in saying work session was just the ability, like she's saying, to digest it more and have the opportunity for feedback in a meaningful way. So I think this addresses my concern. I'd be curious if everybody else agrees, or if there's any other outstanding questions on how our role really fits in.
Bill, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe Jessica could give an example of where you would draw that line between strategy and, I forget what word you used, but between strategy and doing, where you drew the line between
Phil, that's a
the
great,
board and the staff.
Yep. Phil, that's a great question. Heidi's presentation will show exactly where we see that line.
We'll circle back and ask
Yeah.
you if you're got your question answered, Phil. Is that all right?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. All right, Heidi.
All right, thank you all. Thank you for letting me join you today to give you an update. All right, so we've got our agenda here today to very briefly revisit the project timeline. We've brought the strategic priorities and goals that we discussed last time back for further discussion, and we've also done further refinement on it. So yeah, we'll go on to the next one. Let's see if it's on. Okay, it's working. So our project timeline, we are very much in the drafting of the strategic plan. So with that, we are defining the strategic priorities and goals, which is the external facing part of the strategic plan. Since we briefed you last month, we've further refined the goals, and we've added success statements, which we'll go over in the next several slides. So we're going to go over each priority, its goals, and success statements, but I'm going to start with the strategic framework for impacts that we've been working with that Jessica alluded to, and then I think Phil is asking about. So here is the strategic framework for impact. This is probably where we're going to spend quite a bit of our time today. So I've got a number of notes here that I'm trying to get through. As you can see, I've only included one of the 4 strategic priorities detailed out. And I don't have it completely detailed out. I do on the public facing side. So we've got the left-hand side has the strategic priorities, which are public facing, the goals, which are public facing, and then the success statements, which are public facing. So the far left column, the strategic priorities have not changed since the last time that we met. We have made changes to the goals and the success statements, which again, we'll go into more detail, will be easier to see on the additional slides, but I just want to give you a little bit of context. We really, as we looked at the goals, as we discussed the goals, as we talked about the goals with staff, we realized we weren't all totally clear. They were very short. They were like 3 words each. And we thought, there's more discussion there. We need the details to be super clear so that the community understands what we're trying to achieve. And then we found another example of another library who used success statements. And we felt that paired really nicely to go into even further detail and additionally to really center community members and in some cases staff on here are the people who are benefiting from this goal that we were trying to achieve. So I wanted to give you some context of what we're trying to do there. But that line there that you see then on the right-hand side, the objectives and the actions are internal. It's what the staff is going to be working on to make sure that we're achieving these goals and these strategic priorities and that we're meeting these success statements. And so we have one example included here where under our strategic priority of expand access, one of our goals is to create library spaces that are accessible and welcoming to all. We've got our success statement saying community members have equitable access to comfortable, safe, and modern libraries in convenient locations. So that's what we're hoping to get approval for and adoption for from the board and the council, that you feel that reflects what we all heard from phase 1 community feedback and is a direction that you agree with. And on the staff side, over on the right-hand side, the objectives and actions. For this example, we would create an updated facilities plan for the library system. In order to do that, some of the actions would be to secure funding and contract with a consultant to help us undertake the studies needed to create an updated facilities. So we would imagine that in the fall, we would start reporting to you annually about the progress that we've made. There may be quarterly check-ins as well if needed. And as Jessica mentioned, those objectives and actions we would be working on for FY24, and then in FY24, we're working on those for FY25, that you're not going to see every goal have a distinct objective. These are things we're trying to achieve over those 5 years, not necessarily every single year. Some of them will be much longer projects, but again, we'll keep you updated on progress. So any questions about the framework that we're trying to achieve? And like I said, we'll get to the content later.
Well, it's clear. Jessica, you mentioned the dividing line come clear to all this. Is this the dividing line?
That is what we see as the dividing line, is the colors, what we want you signing off on to set that direction for the next 5 years is what's the orange. Obviously, with it all filled in, as Heidi said, we have a view. It's actually in your packet on the last page. We also have that too. And then to make this a living strategy, that annual and quarterly work is really where we are creating those objectives. And as Heidi mentioned, sometimes they are multi-year, and sometimes we envision them as, this, particularly in this sort of baseline year. Some of these are creating that facilities plan, but that'll be over time. So, and because it has that tied to budget, we really want to be thoughtful about how we bring it into the work of the library in the annual budgeting process as well, which obviously we want you to see, how those objectives tie to the strategic priorities, and then we talk about them when we, as I said, this is why you'll see in May, when I'm at that workshop with cities, we're going to start using some of this, because I think it really is a nice way of showing the current investments and how they support the impact we want to have, and then we can use it going forward.
So Phil, this is the answer to your question. Does it feel like the answer?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay, thank you. And I would add too that the orange, the 3 columns on the left-hand side are what we're going to build the strategic plan narrative, the public-facing document, the public-facing webpage, that kind of thing. The 2 columns on the right are what we use to create the internal implementation plan that you won't see on the webpage, that you won't see on the external document, except when we're reporting back to say, here's the progress we've made, or here's what we've achieved. Okay, so having that set up, now we're going to start going into the content, and we have some questions here to inform the conversation, the discussion, if they're helpful. But as we're looking at the content filled out for the 4 strategic priorities, are the priorities and goals clear? Is anything from the phase 1 key insights missing? And in your role as a board of trustee, does this framework allow you to understand and communicate to others the strategic priorities of the library? So with that in mind, here's our first strategic priority: expand access, make our collections, programs, and services available when, where, and how people want them. We have 3 goals. Again, the 3 goals were you saw a version of the 3 goals last time, and we just detailed them out more, and then added success statements for each of the goals.
These were in our packet. And I thought they were really clear and well worded. I use as an example. Community members have equitable access to comfortable, safe, and modern libraries and convenient locations. Every word is meaty in there. Every word contributes. There's nothing extra. It's really clear. I think this is a job well done.
Thank you. That's wonderful to hear. I cannot tell you the number of hours that we've spent on literally every single word. Of course, we are open to feedback if there are words that are unclear. But yes, we've worked very hard and looked at every single letter many times.
I'll have a question, Brian.
Oh, Phil.
Yeah, so I really like the expand access as the priority. My concern in the way this is worded is that it's very much about the physical library. And somebody once referred to the website and the digital collections as the 6th branch. And I really think you need to incorporate access to that in these goals. I don't think it expresses the fact that you have that other branch that's online.
May I ask a quick, so in the materials Jessica sent yesterday under expand access, it actually does list that as a goal. It does say ensure every community member has access in a format that works for them, and it makes specific reference to the digital and print collections. So how does that line up with this chart?
That is this. So success means, you're right.
Oh, yes. So, okay, it's under,
Yeah,
it is
sorry,
under there that it.
yeah, sorry, this is like-
Okay. Sorry, I was looking at 2 things at the same time.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it does reference the digital and print collection.
And the library website that is accessible and easy to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I think it goes much deeper than that. Than, do we have a website? So I'll leave it there.
No, thank you for the feedback.
Any additional feedback on this one or additional discussion, or do we want to move to the other ones? Natasha, you.
Oh, no,
Okay.
I was just saying that I really am happy to see that word diverse voice. That was a good word choice. I really appreciate that, because I think that's probably one of the most important roles libraries play, is that we have all voices covered. I think that's seen in your pile of books over here too. So I'm really happy to see that in there. Thank you for including that. Thank you.
I do
All right,
think,
well, sorry, please go ahead.
I love this. I think this looks really great. And I appreciate the way you've separated out from the previous page as well for us. The one thing I think is, as we think about too, the reporting piece of things. So I know that's another like whole objective, another strategy later, but being able to think about the language and the success means and being able to speak to that in examples, like as you get into the implementation of the plan itself, I think will be important to say, like, this is how we assured that we had, you know, that there was the robust digital and print collections and things like that, because it's not specifically measurable, which I don't think it needs to be in the success piece, but being able to refer back to and use the success language later in future years for reporting back is just kind of one thing that I'm holding in my mind and thinking about. But I really like the way that this is developed. And thank you for your long hours going through this stuff. I know it's been a lot of work.
Thank you, Rebecca. I really appreciate that feedback on, you know, yes, if success is something looking forward, okay, when we get there, how are we looking back and having that measurement piece in place? So we know that we did that. And I think you're absolutely right. There is more work to do in that. So I'm totally in agreement with you on why that's important.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. We'll move to the next one, if that's all right. And then we'll also have another slide that then has all of them on one slide. If we need further discussion for the concept or any additional ones. So our next strategic priority, increase impact, create valuable experiences for every resident and meet their needs at every stage of life. We have 2 goals under this one. Again, you will have seen a version of these. Last time it was elevate literacy and lifelong learning. We have added for Boise residents just to make it even more distinct, and then really felt that the success statement for this one helped detail what we meant by that, as well as then collaborate with community organizations to optimize connections. Discussions on this one, or shall I move to the next?
Move on, it's very clear.
Well, okay. Our next strategic priority, optimize resources, modernize, strengthen, and streamline our operational capabilities. We have 2 goals under this strategic priority. And again, new success statements that you won't have seen before. We're hopefully able to review a little bit last night or this morning. We did change our wording on the invest in a well-trained, well-supported workforce. We wanted to make it really clear both what the community can expect and what we're hoping to provide to the staff.
Comments, questions?
All right, and then I'll move to the final strategic priority, measure value, establish impact and performance metrics, and use data for decision-making. We also have 2 goals under this strategic priority. We, again, detailed them a little bit more. Actually, this one is probably the one that we changed the most as we really thought about it. When we got to the concept where we wanted the success statements that really centered the residents, the community members, and or staff, that did change some of the wording. So these are, especially the last one, the harness feedback from internal and external stakeholders. Gates, one of the project team members, really caught that of you know, here, this was a really key piece of what we are trying to achieve with the strategic plan overall and what we heard back from the community. So that's our final strategic priority. So I can move to then this, which has it all on one page, or one slide, which we thought was pretty intense, which is why we separated those out. And again, just with those questions in mind, if you want any further discussion on, are the priorities, goals, and success statements clear? Do you think there's anything missing from the phase 1 key insights? And does this framework allow you to achieve what you're hoping to achieve as a board member, both understanding and communicating the library's strategy and strategic priorities?
Any other comments or questions?
Brian, it's maybe a question about, we've talked quite a bit about sort of having more data that we're then sharing out with people to really show the impact of the library. Where do you see that fitting in here? Do you see it in sort of this piece about collaboration? Right? I guess maybe I would like to see that, but maybe it goes more in the blue pieces. So
I
maybe a question, like how is that built into this?
I interpret that as goal, the first goal, measured value, measure and communicate impact of the library on the Boise community. That's,
Okay.
Phil has a question too.
Yes.
Phil, I heard you.
There's also been some comments about the community may not know about resources that the library has. If we were to attack that, well, I guess one, do you feel like that's in these? And secondly, where would you think that would be?
Let me take a stab.
It's great. I like how you're,
The third goal under expand access, increase the number of people who are aware of and benefit from the variety of services the library provides. That's what I interpreted, got at that, your question, Phil.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chair. One great job getting all the words down. I can't imagine the amount of wordsmithing that's gone into each and every one of these. And I always encourage people not to wordsmith, for you in a group setting. I do go back to our meeting with our police and our fire department. And I really appreciate and I like the investment in a well-trained, well-supported workforce. I think as a council member, I also have a desire to make sure it's on par and best in class with what we see across the country in the way that we're investing in the library. And so if there are ways to make sure that there's clarity in that too, that may be something that would be helpful for me as a council member to know that a goal is to really have it be on par with what we want to see from some of our best in class libraries and cities across the country.
thank you.
Brian, Rebecca, and Phil both have.
Sorry, Rebecca, did you have a question?
A suggestion, not gonna wordsmith per Councilmember Halliburton's recommendation. I do think carrying through some of that awareness language and communication language into the success means component, specifically around the two bits we just talked about. After increasing the number of people who are aware of and benefit from the library, I love this idea of residents having the personal connection and understanding how the library supports. It feels a little vague. And then the other one I was looking at was on the bottom, measuring and communicating the impact of the library, that Boise residents would have not just confidence, but foundational awareness. I think are the two. Carrying some of that awareness through into this, what success means pieces. And I would leave you to suggest how that language might look, but just bringing that little level of clarity. I see it very clearly in the goals, but carrying it through to the success about those communications components is my only suggestion.
Thank you, Rebecca. That's a great insight. Yeah, they're drafts, so we will be back at them. And I especially that awareness leading to advocacy. You're right. I think we could really make sure that we're calling that out.
Bill, I heard your hand is raised. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a comment about it. I think as you go down the page, things get harder and harder to measure and get harder and harder to define success. And so we're not going to talk about that here, but I would really, I think the staff is going to have to hold themselves to a very high standard in order for, like the last bullet, in order for harness the feedback, in order for that to really work and contribute in a positive way to the library's success. I think the staff will have to be very hard-nosed about what the definition of success is.
Can you go back to the slide that had the orange and the gray or very blue, right there. Rebecca made a comment during last month's meeting that's kind of tied to their comments they both just made, Phil and Rebecca now, that you should try and utilize SMART goals in your objective and action section. SMART, specific, measurable, actionable, reasonable, time bound. And those would be the basis for your reports on your progress, how well you're doing against SMART goals. We had a chance to think about that any further.
I think that's a great point. And I think part of where we're at is we wanted to make sure that you all felt confident in what's on the left-hand side. And then absolutely, as we get, I'll go to my final slide if that's okay. We can continue having discussion, but that's really part of what we're doing next. We'll have two things happening in parallel. Before we see you again, before I meet with you again about this topic is using that framework that we've shown to really draft the external facing document for the board to review and then for adoption and approval. And then also designing that internal facing implementation process, which yes, will need to be much clearer about what actually is an objective and an action that fits with the strategic plan. How is that managed? What makes the cut? All kinds of things. That absolutely is work that we've already started doing, looking at how other libraries have done it, how other strategic plans have been handled. We're also working with other people in the city to make sure that's also a city standard that we're meeting as well. But yes, that's absolutely a great suggestion that we're being very careful about how we're defining our objectives and actions.
Any other comments or questions? I had one more. There was an interesting discussion about learn and grow, and just grow on the vision, I think it was. You made any final conclusions on that?
We haven't. We set that aside for now, and that's something we'll revisit then as we do this draft for you. So if you have suggestions for us, we're still taking suggestions. If you have ideas for the vision.
You guys did discussion. Just wanted to know.
Okay. We have it final.
All right. Heidi, I think that's the end of your presentation, yes?
Yes, thank you so much for your feedback.
And now Jessica is back on the floor.
Yeah, back on the floor, but before that, I do really want to appreciate it. And this is such a reminder of why giving you guys more time to engage and reflect and have sort of these multiple stage discussions using this forum so that you're all hearing from each other and talking together. I think it really just solidified what we heard last month. And yeah, boy, and so we'll do that going forward.
So interim fiscal year.
Interim fiscal year budget change. So this is an interim budget change, as you remember, is an off-cycle request to adjust our current budget. And this is a one-time funding request related to, I'm very excited to say, investments in this facility. Particularly, you've heard about some of these, but this is where we are, becoming shovel ready. And so now we want to be moving funding from the portfolio project, which is in our general funds, so that now we can spend them. And so we've got this request to you. These are some first floor renovation money that will help us with that circulation desk, the ADA compliance issues, but using that opportunity to really do some investments. The fourth floor renovation. We're going to remove a wall and help expand some of the storage that we have up there. And then really wanting to get going on a main library space study. Since we have looked at the library sort of in different pieces, it's time for us to really look at it as a single entity and get going on some of that work. We are hoping and haven't been able to confirm, but either in May or June, we'll have an update for you on the main library remodel or the main library work. Like, since some of that will now be actually starting and get to see the roof. Actually, you probably won't see the roof where it goes up on the roof, but That's scheduled for May and then our sorter as well. So we're gonna give you a more in-depth look at that this month. Questions?
Okay, if there are no questions, this requires a motion and a vote. If anyone care to make a motion to approve the interim fiscal year budget change request?
I moved to
I
approve
will do it. Go ahead.
23 budget changes.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
I
Aye. All right, motion carried. And the next item is trustee to review payment vouchers. And Phil, you're the next person up. Is that okay with you?
Yeah,
Thank you. The next meeting will be held on May 10th, 2023. Anyone have any issues with that? All right, I have one last thing to share. I was looking at the system statistics and our circulation for the first 6 months of the year. The system statistics report covered the first 6 months of the year, so it's a good half-year measure. Our total circulation was just under 1 million items, 923,000. So I thought it'd be pretty cool if we could hit 2 million for the year. And patron visits were up 29% to 251,000, 252,000 rounded up. So we're on pace to hit 500,000 patron visits this year. Those are pretty impressive numbers. And now we want to have a for an executive session. Is someone prepared to make a motion?
Brian, since I have to leave, it might be cleaner, I think. I don't know. I'm trying to look at Ed through the screen. If I just go ahead and leave now before you all adjourn to executive session. So I'm sorry that I have a meeting, but I will
Okay.
see you all next month.
All right. Thanks, Nikki.
Bye.
I move that under provisions of Idaho State Code 742061B, this board recess to an executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters, and their roll call be taken on this motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Roll call.
Roll call. Roll.
Second. Second. I made the motion.
All right, I'll second the motion.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Roll call. Lemons.
President, yeah.
Magnuson.
yes.
Fresh. Yes. Plenty.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carried. Those online, you'll need to go leave Zoom and go into Teams to come back to Zoom to adjourn.
Okay, the executive session has adjourned. And now it's time to adjourn this meeting. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
I think Rebecca, did you do a second, Rebecca?
We see your second. All right, all in favor, say aye.
I.
Thumbs up, Rebecca. Aye. Okay.
Bill.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.